thank you for the kind introduction, and also thank you for joining me today for the talk. Today I want to talk to you about my experience and also the learnings that I have working with monitoring and forecasting KPIs. But also I want to talk to you about how we as a company, we learn to navigate through the unknown by taking control over our KPIs. But before I get into this topic, I would like to say a few words about myself and the background and how I made the journey from academia to industry. And maybe some of you have did this before. I started in 2010 as a research assistant at the Johannes Kepler University in Linz, where I started doing my PhD studies. I finished my PhD in 2013, and after finishing my PhD, I stayed for 2 more years as a postdoc at the university, where I worked on different topics. One of them was semantic sequential pattern mining. And after doing all this work and after acquiring all this knowledge in science and in research, I decided to join Runtastic in 2015 as a first data scientist. And I was really motivated about the vision of the company, about the vast amounts of data that the company had. And I was also very eager to apply this knowledge that I acquired over the years in research in industry. Currently, we are a team of 5 data scientists. I'm working together with them to deploy different data products, to create insights from data, and also, of course, generate value for the business users. Since I've been talking a bit about Runtastic, let me introduce you also to the company. Runtastic by the numbers. Runtastic was founded in 2009, so 8-9 years ago. Soon we will be 9 years old. We are now about 235 employees from 38, now actually 40 plus different nationalities and countries, so we are very international. We also have our products in many different languages, so most of them are also even in 15 different languages translated. We are one team with one vision, and that vision is we want every individual to live a more aware and active lifestyle with Runtastic, leading to a longer and happier life. Our portfolio of products covers 4 main areas, which is cardio, strength, daily habits, and nutrition. And what we provide is mobile applications in the area of health and fitness for our users, where these users can use these products then to live a more healthy life. You probably heard already about our products. We have on the market, I think, more than 20 or 28 different applications, both on the App Store as well as on the Play Store. So a bit about numbers so that you see what kind of data I'm talking about. Currently we have over 30 million registered users. In total, more than 246 million downloads. So we have, given the number of apps that we also have a lot of downloads. And also we have a lot of followers, a lot of fans and followers. So you can imagine with this kind of amount of data that we need to make use of this data, and we need to leverage this data for our business users as well as for our customers. So let me get now to the topic of my talk today, and let me tell you how we defined our KPIs and also how we made use of our KPIs to feel more in control of the business. Before I get into the how we did this, I want to talk shortly a bit about the what and the why. So what are KPIs? If some of you don't know, KPIs are key performance indicators. They are quantifiable measures to evaluate the success or the health of a business. So to give you an example, imagine that your business is an aircraft, an airplane, and the KPIs are basically the metrics or the values that you can see on the dashboard of the plane. They help you navigate the plane, and they tell you how fast you're going, how much fuel you have, and so on. So basically KPIs quantify in the same way also the health of a business. Why are KPIs so useful? Why do you think many companies define KPIs and actually want to follow KPIs also in their goals? Well, first of all, as I said, they're measurable, quantifiable, which makes it possible that you can objectively evaluate how good you're doing. And this is a good aspect. Second, it's data-driven. Because you're calculating this metric based on data, of course, it helps the company work more data-driven. So everything then that the company does is based on these KPIs. It also helps you to gauge the effectiveness of your processes or everything that you do on a daily basis. The KPI will show you whether you improved or whether you didn't improve. So it helps you also to figure out whether the things that you're doing in your daily work also help the business move forward. And as I said in the beginning, they're quantifiable. They also show whether the business is doing well, and this is very important for managers. But also it's helpful for setting goals, because if you're trying to bring the company to the next level, it's not enough to just define a strategy. You have to have metrics that you need to follow. You need to be able to set some goals and then be able to achieve these goals and measure whether you're achieving these goals. And one of the most important aspects that I find useful when defining KPIs is that with KPIs, you have a common language across the company. So everyone works towards the same goal. You have a metric that every department knows what they mean and how to achieve them. And when they talk about how to move forward and how to bring success to the company, they talk about the same KPIs, they talk about the same language. So common language, common goal. Some examples for those who maybe don't have yet seen KPIs or work with KPIs, there are different ways to define them. I'm not giving you examples of our KPIs necessarily, or I'm not telling you should define these KPIs, they're just simply examples. The first ones are simply numbers, raw counts. But you can also define KPIs as ratios, like the ROI or retention or churn rate, and so on and so forth. So now that we've seen the what are the KPIs and why are they so useful, let's get into the how. And in the following, I want to give you 7 pieces of advice from me as a data scientist on how to take control over the KPIs. First advice for you today is choose wisely. Why is that? Well, first of all, you don't get to change your KPIs every day. That's definitely not the case, and a company is not going to do that just because it doesn't work out. So when KPIs are being selected, you will most probably work with them for a very long period of time, sometimes for more than 1 year. So if you get to choose it once, you have to choose it wisely or choose SMART. And one of the methodologies here to choose your KPIs is the actual method SMART. It comes from being specific. It has to have a clear purpose for the business. It has to be measurable, as I said. You have to put a number behind it. It has to also be achievable, because if you define a KPI that you can't really achieve, then what's the point to work with it, right? Or define goals based on it. It has to be relevant for the business. Of course, if you're defining a KPI that is not really truly reflecting the health and the success of the business, then it's not a good KPI. So it has to be relevant. And finally, it has to be time-phased. So it has to be measured over a specific period of time to show the value and also to show that you're actually doing progress. Now, many of you are probably data scientists, data engineers, product managers, and so on. When you're working with different business users, they will probably want to define certain KPIs. In this case, you as a data scientist, you need to give them advice about what is a good metric and what makes sense for the business. So you advise as a data scientist, but actually the management decides at the end what KPIs to choose. And therefore, my advice for you is be proactive about it. If you know that you have a certain experience and expertise in the field, then you can give them arguments why certain KPIs are better or not. Basically, do your homework. So analyze the data, make sure you understand the user behavior, you understand your data, and then give management advice about what is a good KPI. So it's essential that you communicate and consult management after you have done your homework and after you have understood the data behind it. As I said, you advise, but at the end management decides. If it happens that you don't agree with what was selected, make it work either way. Why? Because it's your job to make the company prosper, and it's your job to also teach the company how to move forward. My second advice for you today, understand thoroughly. It's a very basic and essential advice, but why should you care so much about this? Why should you care even as a product manager? Why should you care as a software engineer? Well, you can't really optimize something you don't understand. Imagine you're trying to fly a plane, but you have no clue what the dashboard is showing you. You don't understand anything on the dashboard. Can you actually navigate that plane? No. It's the same way also with KPIs and also with businesses. If you don't understand the KPIs or the metrics that you're working with, you basically cannot work with them. You cannot optimize them. You cannot know whether they perform good or bad. You also cannot assess, is this bad now or is this good, what we're doing? You also cannot act upon them. And it also creates a lot of waste of resources, because you will probably try many different things and see they don't have any impact on the KPIs, and then you will waste basically the resources of the company. And if you don't understand them, then most probably you also won't reach the goals that you create based on these KPIs. So what should you do to understand them? We've seen that it's very important to understand them. What should you do? Well, first step, understand where the data is coming from. Is the data reliable? Is the data complete? Then understand how it's calculated, and I will get back to this step because this is one of the most important aspects when it comes to forecasting. Then analyze the data. So analyze this KPI, figure out what is it composed of, figure out which other metrics are driving this KPI or have an influence on this KPI. This is also a very important aspect. And also try to analyze your KPI at different granularity levels. Basically, you can do an analysis on different markets or on different countries. And to understand them, you should also monitor them, see how they behave over time or how they change. Do they have a seasonality, a yearly seasonality or a weekly seasonality, and so on and so forth. So now coming back to the math behind it. I said before that it's very important in understanding the KPIs to understand also how they're being calculated. Focus on the main components of your KPI. And what do I mean by that? Well, KPIs, all of them, almost all of them are aggregates of some sort. And I think you agree with this. Let me give you some examples. There are types of KPIs which are counts of non-repeatable events. And there are two types here. Either we are talking about the possibility where there's a churn possible, like for instance, there's no churn possible, like for instance, let's say registered users, or where you have to take churn into consideration. When you have, for instance, a subscription model and users can join, can activate the subscription model, or they can leave your subscription model. So different types of counts. Then we have also windowed aggregates, where you calculate a certain number over a specific window, a time interval. And you also have ratios, right? The typical one, churn rate or conversion rate. And it's very important that you understand what kind of metric you're dealing with when it comes to forecasting. And I will show you also why this is so important. And let's stick with our active subscribers. So imagine you have an online business where you offer users the possibility to become members and subscribe to your services that, let's say, get renewed every month. So these users can join, can buy this membership, and they can also leave it. They can cancel their membership. So if you would be a manager and you would look at the number of active subscribers, and if you would have a very successful business, then you would see, let's say, an exponential growth of your active subscribers. But actually, as a data scientist, you should see something else. What a data scientist should see in this case is not simply the simple number of counts of active subscribers, but they should see it as an aggregate of my new subscribers that I get on a daily basis, minus, of course, my churning users. And it's really interesting. This is it is a sample data, but if you sum up cumulatively the new and churn, you end up with this nice graph. And it would be fairly easy to predict on this exponential growth, but I would ask you this, would your prediction be reliable, how it would behave in the future? Would you be able to spot differences or small changes that occur over time? And would you be able to do this early on before it's too late? If you only focus on the aggregated numbers. And this is where knowing how your KPI is calculated becomes very important. Because you see here also for the new and churn, you notice certain patterns. These patterns are not available here. You will never spot them here. And this is why it's important to focus on the components, because these components will give you more information about what's going on behind the data. And finally, a last step in understanding KPIs is to monitor them. I mentioned this before. Many of you have in your companies probably dashboards where you show on a daily basis what are the current values on the KPIs, but this is not enough. As I said, it's important to look also at the basic components to identify their seasonality. But also, some choose to set up certain alerts mechanism to notify them when something goes wrong, when KPIs either suddenly change their behavior. Monitoring is not enough, definitely. So, since my talk today is about forecasting, you need to estimate the future behavior. Why is this so important? Well, most of the time when you set goals, you want to set some goals that are achievable. How can you do that? Well, if you can estimate how your KPI will look in the future, you can know what kind of goals you can set for the KPI in a way that it's also realistic for your company, but also you can set it in an ambitious way. So you say, okay, if this is natural to happen in the next 3 months, then I will set my goal 10% higher so that I make it more ambitious. So this is one of the main reasons why we want to estimate future behavior. But this is not the only one, because one of the main gains that you get by estimating KPIs is that if your business is in danger, you can spot this early on by estimating, by predicting how will this KPI perform in the future. And this is what I will be talking about now. So why should you do that? Well, after all, they're just indicators. So KPIs are just showing you what happened in the past and what is going on right now, maybe not even that. So think about it like it's just like a thermometer. It just tells you what happened, but it doesn't tell you why it happened. It doesn't tell you why you have 40 degrees, right? KPIs don't do that. And one of the most critical points about this is that you want to know what opportunities and also probably dangers lie ahead. This is one of the reasons why you would like to estimate them. An important advice here is that drivers, and here I refer to metrics that influence your KPI directly, those are your more valuable allies, because these drivers will contain the impact earlier than your KPIs. So if you also monitor and predict the drivers that you have, you will know earlier that a change is going to happen also on your KPIs. How to predict? I won't be talking here about a certain algorithm that we developed and go into the details into the math, but I want to show you some different forecasting methods. You can start simply by growth-based. There are also different logistic methods. You can also see probabilistic models that can help you forecast such time series. There are also time series forecasting methods like ARIMA. You can also use machine learning. I don't see it valuable, and I'm not using this kind of methods. Here I will only give you some examples that you can use. And I will show you also what we used to forecast our KPIs. Now, You probably don't want to reinvent the wheel, so there are algorithms out there, and there are also a lot of libraries in R and in Python that you can use already to predict a time series. And now I want to introduce you to the library that we used, and this is called Prophet. It was implemented by the Facebook data science team. It's an open source software and library, and it's implemented both in R and Python. So if you like to code in R, then you can use it. If you like to code in Python, you can use it as well. They also have a paper that describes the exact algorithm behind it, and you can read more about it also on their website, on their GitHub page. So how does it work? It basically also has some components behind it which get summed up. So it's a decomposable time series model, just like the ARIMA model, if some of you are aware of this type of models. It basically decomposes your time series into 3 components, into the trend. In this case, it's G, which represents the model of non-periodic changes. Then you have the seasonality component S, which represents your periodic changes in your time series. And also there is a component H, which represents irregular events in your data. I will give you some examples, and also I will give you some examples where you can see also how these components are reflected then in the model. So for instance, you can see here on the chart, the black dots represent the actual values, and the blue line represent the model that was trained and that was fitted to this time series. You can see that it doesn't fit it perfectly, but this is not the point. The point is not to fit your model exactly, because this would be overfitting. The point is that you can accurately predict what will happen in the future, and you can accurately also identify the trend, the seasonality component in this time series. I will also show you then also how to train better and fit better the model to obtain a better accuracy. So what are the capabilities of this Prophet library? I want to give you some highlights. As I said, the growth component or the trend component now currently is able to learn a linear growth or a logistic growth. I've also heard that Facebook is working on implementing new feature on this component, so probably it will be able also to train different fits on this component. It also has the possibility to identify change points. Also, seasonality, the seasonality component here, I'm talking about the yearly, monthly, weekly, and daily seasonality. When this library was launched, was released for the first time, I think about 2 years ago, it was January 2017, if I'm not mistaken. It was only capable of learning yearly and weekly seasonality. Then they started introducing the daily component and also the monthly seasonality component. It is also able now, not just with additive, basically to add up these seasonality components, but it's able also to multiply the seasonality components, because sometimes your trend has not an additive effect over your seasonality, but a multiplicative. So your seasonality increases over time. And as I said, you can also incorporate the holidays. I will also give you here examples of how to use this component. So the idea behind holidays, this is why it's also called a holiday component, is that some events during the year occur at irregular time frames. So for instance, there are certain holidays during the year that don't occur on the same day. Not, for instance, not like Christmas. Christmas is also always on the same day, but there are certain events that don't occur on the same day. So when this irregularity happens, you can use this component if you know that you have such irregular events that affect your KPI. Like for instance, if you do campaigns or advertisements and you know that these advertisements affect your KPI directly, you can use this component to tell the model, here is when this event happened. And if you also know when these events will happen in the future, then you can use this component also to predict these future behaviors. And you can also define a lower and upper window effect. What's also nice about Prophet is that it deals with missing values. So it's really great because ARIMA, for instance, cannot deal with missing values, and also deals with irregularly spaced data. So if you don't have daily values, but you have values once every day, then once every 2 days, this is fine. And now to show you an example with the components. So here you can also ask Prophet, it has also nice visualization capabilities. Here, for instance, for an example, we plot here the trend component, which you can see up, the yearly and the weekly seasonality. So you can also identify how your KPI behaves differently during the days of the week or during the months of the year. And as I said, it has multiple seasonality components. Why did we use Prophet? Basically, all the models that we've seen so far, we had trouble tuning them and using the parameters to make them more flexible, and also to incorporate our intuitions about the data. So as you've seen, the Prophet model is very intuitive and easy to use. The components have a meaning, and you can then identify the relationship of these components to your actual KPI. So it's easy to use, it's very fast. We actually train these models on a daily basis. It's interpretable, and it simply works. We also did evaluations and comparison with other approaches, and Prophet actually sometimes even did better. So let me give you a brief example in R. Here you can see, let's say the log, we take the example of Wikipedia page views of this very famous American football quarterback, Peyton Manning. Some of you might know him. So here you see that how this time series behaves over time, and you see that there are certain seasonalities. And what we simply do, this is, you can ignore the first part because the first part is simply plotting the data, getting the data and plotting it. The actual use of Prophet is when we call the Prophet function on our data frame. We create then a data frame to tell Prophet for how many future days it should predict, which is 365. We want the model to predict for another year. And then we apply this model to my future data frame and simply call the predict function. 3 lines of code. And then if we plot, the library, as I said, includes visualization methods. You can plot this result and you can see how your model fits the data. You can also plot the components, which we've seen before, to also get a better understanding of how the fit is. Fourth is automate. So we have a deployment infrastructure on our analytics platform. We have different data sources, and we take these different data sources and we process them on our SQL server. And then using SQL server, we also drive certain reports and prepare certain reports or interactive dashboards for our management. And since we had this setup before, we were thinking, how can we integrate the estimates and learn our models on this infrastructure to also make the estimates available for our business users? Since they're using already these reports and interactive dashboards, we were thinking how we can directly automate and put these predictions on this platform. So to do this, we used R together with transactional SQL servers. There is a feature now, also about 2 years old, that you can use R within SQL code. We also adopted Shiny Server, where we show also, this is more for data scientists to evaluate past predictions so that we make sure that the predictions that we make are also accurate. A simple example, so using R and Translate SQL is really straightforward. Here is a very simple hello world example where you simply say SQL that you're using R, and you see also here the result of execution. I also provide you an example where we actually use more sophisticated R codes. Here we basically call the Prophet model and do predictions, and then the result then is being reported back into a SQL result. Fairly simple. What did we learn so far from using this? Well, at the beginning it wasn't so easy, so there were clear communication and collaboration barriers. So to do this efficiently, we defined clear responsibilities for data engineers and data scientists, because the data engineers were responsible for the ETL and everything that was running on the SQL server, and to basically automate all these processes and predictions, we needed to have a very clear responsibility definitions with data engineers. So for this, we defined a clear process. We also helped empower the data scientists so that they automate and deploy these predictions more autonomously and independently from the data engineers. We also worked a lot on coding standards so that we make sure that everyone who works, every data scientist who works on these data products can continue and improve. We also had some stability issues running the R Launchpad management on SQL Server, because there are different libraries that you need to use with R, so you constantly need to install new libraries. And this was quite sophisticated, given that now we have 4 instances of the SQL Server. One is working as a test server, the other one as a development server. So we had to have on all of these servers the same setup, so it was quite difficult. We're still learning in this area. 5th advice for you today is inspire trust. Why is that? Well, it's very important that you can trust the predictions that you're making. And there are different ways to evaluate your models. First of all, you need historical data. Because if you know you have yearly seasonality, you have to have at least 1 year of data. You cannot train a model on this kind of data. You have to do a lot of parameter selection. Of course, there is different parameters that Prophet allows. What I've shown you so far is basically calling the Prophet directly on the data frame, which means that Prophet is using the default parameters. But you can do a lot of changes here, and you can train the model to fit different parameters. And Prophet also has this cross-validation method, so you can basically use already the functionalities of Prophet to do evaluations, and it also has different evaluation metrics that you can use to evaluate how good your predictions are. Here's, for instance, some visualization that Prophet provides you so that you can evaluate using cross-validation how good your predictions were. This is, for instance, a metric which is the mean percentage error, and the blue line there represents the average error. We also use Shiny, as I said before, to evaluate. So you're always interested how good did we do in the past. And we use Shiny to evaluate our past predictions. So we look at the data, we look at how were our actuals, how is it now, and how was our estimate. And then we can compare whether we deviated from our actuals in the past. You can also set up some sanity checks. So here we are also currently working on a trend change detection algorithm using Prophet to detect changes, drastic changes to the trend of a KPI. 6th advice is act. To make use of predictions, of course, you don't want to do all this effort and implementations and algorithm without actually making use of them. So it really helps you understand trends and seasonality. It helps you define goals, like I said, because estimating, it helps you to see how much you can achieve from the goal that you've set. It helps you to set realistic, ambitious goals. It also helps you to detect trend changes early on. It helps you to automate these and also derive meaningful actions by looking at the predictions and seeing how they behave. And last but not least, it also helps you to allocate the right resources in the right places. Yeah, and my final advice for you today is optimize. Yes, we started very lean and we started very simple when we implemented our first predictions, but we never stopped since. So our first prediction were deployed about 1.5 years ago, if not even more. And since then, we're constantly optimizing and constantly improving on our predictions. Good enough is not great. So what we did to improve on our prediction is we tried to break down the KPIs at different granularity level. We also noticed that our KPI behaves differently with different products. So since we wanted to learn as good as possible the individual behavior, also the accuracy became better when we actually implemented forecasting models on the individual products. Also, you can integrate events, and now I will show you also an example of how to use this holiday component to actually identify how different events like campaigns or advertisement that you make about your product impact your KPI. What is important here, however, is that you actually collect that data. because if nobody knows when those events happen and if it's not documented, if it's not digitalized, you actually cannot use it in your model. So you actually have to collect regularly those information to help you also predict their future behavior. And also don't forget, you always have room to optimize your parameters, to monitor them and to reevaluate them regularly. And our next step would be here to automate also this parameter evaluation. So currently we're doing this manually, but in the future we want to even automate this process as well. So using the holiday component on the same example that I showed you before. So for instance, we have here the same time series model, and you can see here how the model now, we introduced here two different sets of events, and we input it in our profit function, you can see here. And you can see now how the model successfully identified these events occurring over time. This makes the model also more accurate, but it also helps you to identify and to plan when should I do a certain campaign in order to improve my KPI. So to sum up, choose wisely your KPI, understand them thoroughly, because if you don't understand them, you also cannot predict them accurately. Monitoring is not enough, so you have to forecast, automate then these processes, these predictions, inspire trust, make sure that you can trust these predictions and the estimates that you get at the end are trustworthy and reliable. Act, make use of these predictions, don't just create data and let the data lie there somewhere on the server. So also use them to act upon them and make decisions, and finally optimize continuously. And if you do this, you will have full control over the navigation, and you will also be more efficient in your work, and you will also hopefully drive your business to success. Thank you. If you have any questions, I will switch now to Slido. Can you please come up with some examples of KPIs you monitored and predicted and how it helped? We are currently changing our KPIs after a very long time working with them. So one of our KPIs was also our active subscribers, because we also have a subscription model. So this is one of our KPIs. And what we noticed with this subscription model is that it was highly impacted by our campaigns. We did a lot of campaigning, different departments were doing a lot of campaigning, and the problem we had that we could not accurately predict, especially this metric, how it will behave in the future, because it was highly driven by the campaigns that we were doing. And one of the most challenging topics that we needed to tackle in this area is to collect all these events or campaigns that the different departments in our company were doing and actually digitalize them. Not just that, so you don't only need your past campaigns, but you also need to know when you will do future campaigns, because you need to tell the model when they will happen in the future. And we had to enforce this department somehow, or encourage them to actually put this information on this platform so that we can collect all this data and then input it into these models. So this was proved to be very, very helpful, and the predictions became more accurate afterwards. Are there, yes?
What is your point to predict KPIs? While I believe that your product team, your product managers and your marketing are always improving the product, which causes the improvement of metrics. And I believe this cannot be predicted, because these events are not repeating, and they will happen in the future. For example, your marketing team has spare budget. They will launch a campaign in Facebook ads or in Google AdWords, so the number of registered users will increase. Mm-hmm. But you wouldn't predict the spare budget of your marketing department.
We had two different types of KPIs. We had KPIs that were highly organic. So with this kind of KPIs, it was fairly easy to predict because the behavior was organic. But we also have the other type. And you are right, when you're releasing new products and new features, it has an impact on your KPIs, you're right. But you can actually model them with the holiday component. if you know when you're going to release and you know that something similar also happened in the past, the model can at least estimate what will happen or the impact that it will have. We did not implement such events or such holiday components, like for instance our bi-weekly or monthly release cycles. We did not reflect them in our KPIs because we did not see that it had such a high impact. And think about it also this way, just briefly. You are predicting every single day. So as soon as new data comes in and the trend changes, your model will learn with it. So it will also estimate the future accordingly.
There are some more questions.
Okay. How is running R inside your FB server? What does that mean? Does it scale well? If not, how are you planning to scale it out? You mean how is R running on our SQL server and if it works well? Well, we had some issues because right now it's not R with Transact SQL is not, let's say, not that production ready. We started estimating our KPIs. It was only an experiment. It actually turned out to be very helpful for our business users, and we're constantly doing it. And in 2 years, maybe we had 2 or 3 issues with it, which we've solved. So I think it scales out well. Also, we're predicting daily maybe, let's say, 10 or 20 different KPIs broken down on their different granularity levels. So at the moment, it's not overwhelming and it's not a lot of data. How do you predict drivers and calculate KPI? Or you calibrate your KPI predictions? Let me see if I understand this correctly. You mean how? When you say about calibrating, who asked this question? Maybe someone can give more input on what this means. But predicting drivers, it's easy. You identify them. I think the difficult part is here to identify what are your drivers and what metrics actually have an impact on your KPIs. This is something more difficult. Predicting them, as I said, you have the tools already at place. And how you calibrate your KPIs is basically with setting different parameters and using cross-validation. Are there, yes?
Thank you. Do you solve any optimization problems using a profit prediction? And do you measure how is it enough confident interval of the profit to solve optimization problems?
Like what? Can you give me an example?
So you can solve optimization problem for the future budget, and you need to predict some kind of budget, and you have a confident interval in the profit.
Yes.
And is it enough confidence interval to for solving this problem, or not? Or you don't solve any kind of optimization problem?
We don't try to work, or at least until now, we haven't changed this confidence interval. You can do it as a parameter, so you can also adjust this confidence interval. But you will see that depending on how far in the future you're trying to predict, it will become less and less accurate and less confident. But we haven't yet dealt with this problem.
Okay.